I'm Nova Han. I'm a creative director for music festivals, stage shows, concerts, and immersive experiences around the world. My work has been seen by hundreds of thousands at festivals like Coachella, Electric Forest, Burning Man, and Firefly. I've worked with artists like Deadmau5, Bass Nectar, and the String Cheese Incident. My job has me searching the globe to discover the industry's best artists in installations, performance, movement, set design, costumes, and emerging technologies to create some of the world's greatest live entertainment experiences. Audiences see the awe-inspiring spectacle of the final product, but they have no idea what it takes to get there. We the Creators explores the lives of the artists behind the magic, what drives them to do what they do, the sacrifices they've made, and the pain they've overcome to make art at any cost. Behind every great artist is an even greater story. This is We the Creators. Hi, and welcome to another We the Creators, where our mission is to showcase the incredible artists in live events and the epic journeys they took to get there. So today we're with my friend and incredible installation artist, Daniel Popper. Daniel is a multidisciplinary artist known globally for his larger-than-life sculptures and spectacular public art installations. He also specializes in interactive art, stage design, and interior design. His works have been featured at some of the biggest art and music festivals in the world, like Electric Forest in the US, Boom Festival in Portugal, Rainbow Serpeant in Australia, and Afrikka Burn in South Africa. He's made permanent works for the Nelson Mandela School of Science and Technology, as well as iconic works for Ahau Tulum. Daniel uses a variety of materials from reclaimed wood, steel, vinyl, and technology to create these really impressive and monumental pieces. Not only are they breathtaking, but they make people question their sense of scale in the world, leaving people in states of utter awe and wonder. He's a visionary, an inspirational artist, and just a general badass. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Really good to see you. I feel so fortunate that we get to actually have this time together on video, because normally I would be hugging you and we would be frolicking through a forest together and running into commissary at Electric Forest and dancing till the dawn, and that's just not this year.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so good to see you. I always feel like when I see you, I'm like, wow, there's another one out there who knows about what's going on, like every time I see you at Electric Forest, I go down, I'm like, am I the only one? And then I see Nova and I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one.
yeah, you're not the only one doing 5 million things. Totally. Yeah, it's been, God, as we were just talking before this, and it's just been such an insane year to have everything be wiped out, events-wise for the both of us, really. And this show is really mostly about you. Like, I want to know about Daniel and how you got to this place in your career. But because we're in it right now, I'm actually just quickly, I would love to hear what it's like to be in South Africa right now, because you're in Cape Town. What is that like right now during like the pandemic? And I don't know if like the protests have really had an impact down there, or could you just give us a little global update?
Well, it is. It's an interesting place to be. I mean, the relationship with South Africa is a difficult one. And like I told you, I'm from here and we visit here often, and always questioning, whether we're going to stay or leave. Crime is such a huge issue in this country, and the wealth gap. There's no middle class. There's just like people who have and people who don't have, and poverty is massive problem, and unemployment's huge problem. So when this started coming towards South Africa, people were just like, oh no, like, this country could not afford to have this kind of crisis happen to it. Whereas, other countries, the States, whatever, they had trillions of dollars to pump into the economy to keep it going. South Africa just did not. And the interesting thing is that our president acted very fast. when this started, he wasn't like Trump or any of these other guys who was just like, yeah, we'll see what happens. He saw it, and he was like, instigated a lockdown that was the most severe lockdown in the world. I think it was the harshest of all. We were only allowed outside to go to the store and for medical. We weren't allowed out. You weren't allowed to walk your dog.
Wow.
Alcohol and cigarettes were banned, completely banned. Like, so it was super. We were locked inside. Like there was
no alcohol or cigarettes. While we're here in California, like marijuana is an essential service.
Yeah. And no going out. Like we were not allowed out. So it was a trip, man. Like, and so, you know, I would sneak out and like go drive around like to the shops, you know, like drive over just like, and it was crazy. Like it was dead, but it was, you know, people felt a sense of hope because we had contained this thing, you know, but people were still nervous because really what it did was it was trying to buy time for the healthcare to ramp up, to get ready for when the surge would come. And then, so that was April. And then in May, towards the middle of May, they went, so level 5 was the most strict. And then middle of May, they went up to level 4. And level 4 meant you could go outside for 3 hours a day in the morning.
How do they even mandate that? How do they know that you've been out for 3 hours? Like,
well, the police, man, they were out arresting people.
Wow. How did that feel for you? Like, did you feel?
No. So
did you feel safer or did you feel more unsafe?
No. So it went from this feeling of like real sense of pride in our country, like, wow, like our president did this thing and it's not like America, and you just watch the news of America falling apart and we're like, we're going to be fine, we're going to make it through. And then when they moved up to this weird level where they all of a sudden were like, okay, you're allowed out from 6 to 9 a.m. We were allowed to exercise from 6 to 9 a.m. Then I was like, hang on a second, because now like that made no sense, right? So they started passing laws and it started becoming this weird draconian, like controlling government weirdness going on. And then they started telling us like what we could and couldn't buy. So like there were certain goods you weren't allowed to buy. Like you couldn't buy open shoes, for example. You couldn't buy clothing that had a brand on it.
What?
Yeah, like totally weird. Like,
wow, I wonder how that like affects the psyche of just the population. Does it make it seem more scary? You know?
No, well then it was like, okay, so then people started losing trust in the government because they were like, what are you people? What is going on here? This is insane. And then in June they moved to level 3 where you could go back to work if you had a permit. 6 p.m. is curfew. Everyone has to be home by 6. And they've opened up the sale of alcohol in limited amounts, but cigarettes are still banned.
And that's where you guys are today.
That's where we are now. And the borders are completely shut. So there's no traveling. Domestic travel is allowed with very like strict business permits. You're not allowed to like just go travel domestically. Like
that is wild.
So it's been wild.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that like, you know, what I'm curious about, so like historically, right, when we've seen just civil unrest or conflict, that has really been the impetus of just these huge artistic creative movements. I mean, like you have kind of like the Renaissance era, right, where they had several factors that led to the Renaissance era, but one of them being the medieval crusades, where people literally were like traveling transcontinentally to like fight each other about their religious beliefs. And, you know, in that they couldn't help but to share philosophies and ideas. And that led to the Renaissance era, which, you know, in French means rebirth. So like, given that you're in this really intense space and time, I'm kind of curious to know, like, how did all of this affect your art? And, you know, and don't worry if you've said like, I've done nothing but take a nap, because I'm not going to judge, but like, I'm kind of the philosophy that like any reaction right now is a very appropriate reaction. It's just so volatile out there. So I'm curious to know, like, for you as an artist, when you are having this really draconian experience, like, does that motivate you?
Well, I mean, the first month, April, we spoke a little earlier, was a month of slight disillusionment. So I didn't know where I stood, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I must say that month was a total write-off, and creatively or work-wise. So we just sort of, it was family time, hang out with the kids, wife, and there was, but I was, trying to keep awareness, but at the same time, but I was going through a lot of stuff. So I was going through like confusion, anger, but there was no output creatively. I was just like, it was mostly inward, and there was a lot of napping that happened.
I took a lot of naps that first month too. It was just like bucket puzzles, 1,000-piece puzzles, whatever.
So there was that, and then when we started to move into May, I really, I'd set myself some new goals and started going after them, and just engage with the creative process, but like full on in May, and it's been rolling since then. And so we'll get into that, but my creative process and what that sort of looks like, and how that unravels. So it's not like I'm not an artist, so I don't know what the sort of myth of the artist looks like, of like this person who's suddenly now going to make like resistance art, or art that's speaking about like the times, and I'm not really a political artist, so I don't, that's not a thing, but the creative process just happens, and I'm engaged with my own one. And so what the art that I'm producing that's going to come out of this time will be reminiscent of this time, but it won't be who knows? I don't think it's not a direct response, but it's a direct result.
Directly, yes, I understand that completely. And so I guess like in that, because normally when we're working, we're like so motivated by the projects that we that we see down the road. We're like, hey, I want to make this thing for that purpose. Or a client comes up to us and says, hey, I'd really like something around this concept, and then we'll fabricate with this like kind of purpose in mind. But since everything has just been kind of wiped out, like how do you keep going with your creative process? Like what is your guiding goalpost in terms of what you're wanting to make?
Yeah, well, so that was very interesting because, like you said, a lot of our work is informed by briefs, or, like we'll get an area that we've got to now do something in, and it sort of starts to form the building blocks that we then navigate through the creative process around. Whereas now there's like the abyss. So it's okay, now what, right? So I then had to engage with that creative process, because before I started getting into events, this was the space that I was in. I actually used to be a painter, and I used to create paintings, or I used to, like when I finished art school, and I was sort of like engaged with that process of art making, which is kind of like the abyss. So you're like, well, what is inspiring me now, and inspiration, I love the sort of, I think it's the Picasso quote that like inspiration finds you working, you don't wake up one day inspired, so you have to be working constantly at this thing, and inspiration comes and starts to bubble to the surface. So
yes.
So that's is what I know, and I it's something I know deep down. So I was like, right, well, you have to start somewhere, And so there's some like crazy artists out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Beeple. He's a CG artist.
Yeah.
And he has this like everyday renders kind of thing. He's been doing image a day, I think, for like 10 years. Something ridiculous, it's like over 4,000 images. So I was like, imagine this, imagine like putting out a piece of art every day, like doing a sketch every day. So it's a super ambitious goal, and it's not for everyone. And I've tripped up with that as well, because you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to start doing it. You do a sketch one day, day 2, day 3, day 4, you miss day 5 you must be like, okay, I couldn't do it, I couldn't keep up, and then you're like
story of my life. Story of my goddamn life. You're like, I'm gonna work out.
So the one, definitely the thing is I've set more gentler goals for myself. So it's like, I'm not going to try and create masterpieces. And then my process has moved a lot to I sculpt digitally now. So I work in a variety of softwares, ZBrush, Rhino, and these softwares are like super limitless in terms of what they're capable of doing. So I took the time to like really build on my skills within them. So I started doing little tutorials here and there. And then I would just do small things. So like I was like, okay, well, let me get back into like traditional sculpting. So I started doing some really traditional sculpts of like anatomy, so sculpting like hands, feet, stuff like this.
That's wild, because I feel like you're already masterful at it. I mean, like all of your pieces are these beautiful portraits of people from all different kinds of, they look like different ages, different ethnicities. I mean, and the ratios are exquisite. So that's interesting to me that you're continuing that path of.
So it's more just like different styles, So for example, like I love like classical sculpture, like artists like Rodin, so I was like, well, let's see if we can sculpt hands to look like these bronze like Rodin pieces, And then I was like breaking things up and trying like more like cubist stuff and like geometric ways of sculpting and stylized character ways of sculpting. And I've just been exploring so many different, and then it's like, I start getting excited by like different styles and different methods, and also now starting to like explore working in bronze and what that looks like. So typically sculpting, and then we're going to do like it's a whole process of 3D printing, and then wax, and then bronzing. But you got to start somewhere, if you set out to create a masterpiece, the chances are you're going to fail. So I definitely say I set out to make really bad work. That's what I say. I tell myself, okay, today we're gonna make some rubbish sculpture. Let's design a piece of shit sculpture. It takes off all the pressure, and then I have created some really bad ones. And so that's the thing, and it just. You have to give yourself permission to make really bad stuff. Otherwise, it's not. You're just. I don't know.
I've seen a good body of your work, and I don't think any single one of them looks shitty. But
thank you.
And I would tell you.
Thank you. Well, it's just like in terms of like this process now, like experimenting and redesigning work and creating sculptures that like I want to see, in a digital space. I think that when you get blocked creatively, or like in the creative process where it's like I'm sitting down to do this work, and then it's like, oh man, I don't know what am I going to do now, because where's the sculpture going to go? Yeah. And when you start asking those questions and the blank sort of canvas thing, you will get stuck and you can't move forward, So I've just been dealing with all of those mechanisms to like not be stuck, and to just stay stay working, like sketching ideas
and building your skill sets.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Communicate even further.
Yeah.
How did you start this whole journey? How did you become a big art installation artist? Like, did you get an MFA? Because you're talking about a lot of different types of forms too. I've seen you make amazing things out of like blow up inflatables and foliage and wood and steel. How do you even start this process?
Yeah, so I think I got just a BA Fine Arts. I didn't get a master's degree, and I actually I specialized in painting. I was super into painting in the art world, and then when I finished art school, I was super disillusioned by that world. It's a very weird elite sort of space, and I just never felt like I fitted into it at all. And then Burning Man the regional Burning Man came to South Africa with Afrikka Burn in 2007. And that was my first experience. I think I was like 23 at the time. I was like moving into outdoor space, and I started experimenting with making things outside and seeing what would happen with an audience. And it was just the start of it all. And then an interest in industrial design and how to make things, and then also like established a community of friends who were super clever, who made things out of all different kinds of things. And then I just started following that path, and then I would get and then there were the odd weird requests. So I'd be like, a client would ask, can you make something like this? And I had absolutely no idea, but I would say yes. Sure, I can make it. And then I just started going down that road. And then so like, for example, with the electric forest, chatting with Sampo, he was like, oh, can't we do inflatables? Because they like the idea of these things just folding up afterwards. I was like, I'm sure if I put my mind to it, I could figure it out, and so I did. I just went down that road.
Did you end up like the big lions, for instance, and you made that like those stage pieces? Did you just sketch that all up yourself first and then pass that off to a team that knows how to build these things to scale?
Well, so, like I was telling you, we do a lot of our manufacturing in South Africa. Typically, it's much more cost effective. So Airworks are typically the guys that make those beautiful inflatables that you'd see for EDC. Those guys are just the absolute masters of that stuff, So right. I was looking at them, but there was just no budget to afford those guys because they were, and what they were offering me, I was like, I'm sure with that budget, I could make it happen in South Africa. So like I looked at South Africa and I went to a sort of like mom and pop shop who made like bouncy houses.
They must have been so excited to make something different and cool.
Yeah. So I was like, guys, do you think we can make this? And they were just like, and I was like, I will figure out how. And I just outsourced their facilities, so their tailors and their inflatable people who knew what to do. And then I was like, well, obviously huge. The bulk of that work is done in computers, So started designing these things in computers, and then trying to reverse engineer how to do it. And then I just put together a little team of people, and we sort of figured it out. I got to say, like, I got close to what I did for Electric Forest. Like, I managed to not lose any money, thankfully, but I scraped through with that. And by the time I was finished that job, when I looked at what Airworks produce and the reason why it made sense. I was like, there's a reason why. It's extremely complicated work to do. And I kind of would not take that work on in a hurry again. In fact, I would say use Airworks, and it's worth paying for what they cost,
But I think that you speak to something that is true about anybody who has made it in this industry, which is that like there is no pamphlet for this. There is no book that you can study. There is no real school that you can go to that will teach you like how to just pull this shit off. You just have to like jump in with both feet and trust that you're going to learn along the way, that you're going to answer, you're going to ask the right questions, that you're going to be willing to look like an idiot because you don't fucking know, because you've never done this before, all of those things. But it's like, it doesn't take a genius. It just takes being tenacious.
Yeah, exactly.
And applying your creativity to how you do things as well. Like creative, I feel like the most successful businesses are creative ones, in the sense that like are, creative entrepreneurs, where it's like you actually have to solution orient and find new ways to achieve the goal that you want to get to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So, all that said, I actually kind of want to go back to some of your pieces. And you were saying you're not like a political artist. But what I do find is I feel like a lot of your pieces have this kind of like tribal shamanic theme, if you will. And I don't know if that's like by, by design or if there's a story behind that, but I'm kind of curious to know what your thought and inspiration is behind that.
That's interesting that you pick that up. It is a thing. I think my entry into this world. I know one of your previous guests was Kerry Thompson.
Yeah,
and Kerry's a dear friend and a huge inspiration. And I always tell him, like, he's a really big part of my story. In fact, how I got into doing what I do was directly linked to Kerry Thompson. Because I started doing these sort of installations and trying to figure it out. And I knew it was something I wanted to do, but wasn't quite sure, from South Africa. So when I went to Boom in 2010, I met Kerry at Boom. And we connected. And then in I'd never done anything for any festival yet. I'd only done stuff in South Africa for Afrikka Burn. And I'd never done anything on a huge scale either. And Kerry hit me up in like 2011, and he was like, he was like, how about designing these huge dragons for Boom in 2012? And I'd never done anything like that before. And I was like, dude, awesome. And I made a miniature model. I made a model like, it was like this big, and I sent him a picture of it. Like I'd carved it out of foam, and I'd done this whole like little maquette of this thing, and I sent it to him. He was just like, wow, sick. And we went over to Portugal, absolutely no idea what I was doing. And we made those 2 serpents. That was like my first thing that I'd done on like internationally. When I say international, outside of South Africa, on such a big scale for like a huge festival like that. And so, I sort of got into that visionary art community and tied in with a lot of those guys. And typically what comes along with that is the medicines and stuff like that. So I was into a lot of that, like medicine work and working in that space for a while. That was, I think that's probably where that sort of tribal shamanic stuff comes from, as well as in 2 of the sort of seminal pieces. There are the 2 shamans that I've done for Boom, and so those had that sort of shamanic aesthetic to them that I loved, and then took that into other work, and kept that sort of visionary.
Because all of your pieces, they all have these like deep storytelling aspect to it that that I feel like people can take their own interpretation. But like, I love that piece where that person's like pulling off their face, and you video mapped that, and that tribal medicine man that looks like they're just like holding their hands out, and the person in Mexico ripping their chest open. They all have such a visceral quality to them. But for me, at least, seeing those pieces, they all allude to this higher, deeper desire to connect to something outside of ourselves.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that is it at the essence of it all. And I think that's what visionary art is. And the visionary art movement. These guys, Kerry, Andrew, and Luke, and all that whole. Those guys have been such an inspiration for me. And their work, it really is about connecting to a higher something, or just, sort of eternal space. So, so I think that's it.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I think this goes back to some of my journey as an artist as well. There's the storyline that we hope that motivates us, right? It's like, this is what motivates me to put out into this world. I want to share this story. And it's one thing if people understand it or not. It's like, you have to let it go. You have to let them kind of take on the interpretation as they will. But sometimes I question in myself, like, did that make a difference? Does anyone fucking care? Like, is this important? Felt important to me, but am I delusional? And that's just like, and egotistical? And maybe, is it just about me? Like,
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, some of the,
it's the thing, it's a sort of, really what you're questioning is the purpose of art. It's
yeah.
like, what is the purpose of doing this stuff, you know? And the ego, without the ego, nothing would happen. So nothing would be created, right?
Mm,
Essentially, that's what it's doing. And and the purpose and the sort of act of what you're doing is, so you're getting it straight with yourself, and if um, you're creating something with intention to raise somebody else's vibration, then that intention's there, so I think that with it's about getting your intentions straight before, like, you doing, setting out on a creative project. And if you know what it's like, where your intentions strong, the outcome, whether or not people got it or not, doesn't matter. You did it. It felt good for you, and it felt right for you. Um, and I think that's just the constant dance. It's like, I know when I'm tapping into like a truer intention behind the work, or not. And I think there's also something to be said about just being engaged in the process of creativity. That is also a profound experience. So it's just, and even if that results in a sense of like well-being for yourself, so like, your own mental well-being and your own healing process, it's like when you're engaged in that process, you're kind of on fire, right?
yeah.
You feel alive. And if you're operating at that frequency, then you I think winning.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
It's interesting how like fragile that world can be too, in a way. Like, I worked on a project it was last year. And it was like one of these like immersive pop-up projects that I was creative directing, and it wasn't my idea. It was not my idea. But I figured, like, hey, there's could be it's during a quiet time of my year. It's creative. I get to make, a wonderland still. And I was just gobsmacked at how fragile I am as an artist. I hated my life. I hated my life. I like,
right.
I could not believe like how fragile I was. It's like, it wasn't enough that it was something that was like creative that kept me going. I didn't care about the project. And because I
Right.
was stuck building this thing for, a couple months, I
Yeah.
went into this tailspin of depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fucking,
Yeah.
it was really, it just showed me
Yeah.
how much, and I think everybody's different, but for me, it showed me
Yeah.
like how fragile I function if I'm not 100% on fire or lit up about something.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like, it being a cool thing is not enough. And
Yeah.
I'd like to think that people can feel the difference between substance versus spectacle. Like a
Yeah.
lot of
No.
these pop-ups are
Yeah.
just spectacle, and I call them
Yeah.
selfie safaris, and it's like, who
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah. Sure.
cares?
Yeah. Right. So I think, the way that I've now started to deal with that, and we'll see how this works out. I don't really have much evidence yet to say yes, this works or not, but this is sort of what we've tried to do. So because I've moved from being just like just doing it all myself, and then just outsourcing crew here and there and winging it, to now forming like a proper business and a proper team of guys. So you've met Sam, he works for me. You haven't met
I love
Rob, but
Sam.
you haven't met Rob, but he's another guy. And those two have their own industrial design studio in Cape Town. So they design like furniture and stuff like that. And I've got another guy, Josh, who works for me, and Riley. This is my core team. And so the way that we've dealt with that is, when commercial projects come along, that would just be like sort of like a brand activation at like a shopping mall, for example. That is something that we're totally capable of doing. And it can also bring in revenue that can keep us all fed and keep us all going, which is also important. I know that if I were then to start dedicating my hours of my day to like designing what a cool Instagram little wall in a shopping mall, I'd probably fall over, but our team can totally do it, and the boys, because they come from an industrial design background, their sense of like creative message and meaning, they're not having that conversation. They're like functional, coming from a functional perspective, and can easily bash out those designs. So I think it's important to have a team that you can outsource that stuff to, and then you can oversee it. So you're overseeing it, but you're not invested in it. So
story of my life, just outsource more things, god damn it.
So just so like I'll give it to my studio to handle, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, cool, but I'm not like putting my heart into that, otherwise it's not going to work out.
No, absolutely. You won't get the best of us. Well, since this show is like, we really want to know like about also just like your plight and your journey to get here. I'm kind of curious because it is such a hard time right now for a lot of people. Can you recall like a time that was either particularly hard in life? It could either be personal, that like really like sprung you into action in your art, or maybe it's just about a time that you really messed up on the field, because we do that all the time.
Totally. I did these huge inflatable lions for a local rap artist. And it was a huge concert. I think he had like 60,000 people, and these things were going up on the stage. And it was just me and my wife, like, went to go put these things up, because you literally like, we inflated them, but they were so big. They were almost 40 feet tall. The wind picked up like just before this concert, and these things started blowing, like, and they were like tethered off of like 2 lines. And I just I was like, oh my God, if those tethers go, like those 40-foot lines are going to fly into a crowd of 60,000 people.
Oh my God, it would be the biggest crowd inflatable in the world.
Like, I don't even like, I've never had so much like fear and anxiety in my whole life. But, that, like, and then it started raining, and like, Jesus Christ, we made it through. And thank God nothing happened, but like, we made it through. But there's been, that's just like there's like work struggles of like moments in the field that, I mean, Jesus, like the things you go through with like the cheese, like when that finale happens with all the things flying in the air and the fireworks.
Yeah.
And the performance. I mean, there's so many variables and so many things, and the weather, so many things can go wrong. I mean, if anyone knows about the anxiety of like having shit all come together and work out, I think it's you. So like there's those moments in the field that are just totally insane, where you just like totally lose. You're like, I can't actually believe I'm going through this right now. And you fight so hard to make it happen and pull it off, because I think that's what means so much to us, is pulling it off. It means more to us to pull it off, to make it happen, than it's, and for it to be a success than anything else. It's not about the money. It's just about like making sure we delivered like our promise that we were going to make it happen. I would say my advice to anyone going through that, or who's going through like personal difficulty or pain or whatever it might be, a depression or like hard time, and still putting in that added pressure of like having to be creative and produce beautiful work, I think the only thing you can just do is to just totally constantly remind yourself to just take it easy, like be gentle on yourself. Like, don't set yourself up for huge failure, like just acknowledge the space that you're in. And so like, if you're going through a very difficult time, if it's a breakup or whatever, maybe it's not the time to be taking on big projects, and if you've taken one on already, then I think, it's reaching out for help, getting people to help you do it, and taking the necessary time to heal yourself, to be whole, in order to be able to give that 100% to yourself, to your work. Yeah.
I also think that like when you go through those hardships and you, as you said, like you start to lose your sense of self and identity, that can actually be a real blessing in disguise, right? It's like taking all of that tragic energy, and it's like, it's still energy. And it can be transmuted, right? It can be transmuted to something that really generates and fuels you to move forward. But I think kind of like what we were talking about before the interview, like right now, what's happening is like, you and I are both going through this phase of like, who the fuck am I? Like COVID, like, and when all the jobs are gone and you don't have a purpose to make anything like right there, right in front of you. You don't have that carrot dangling in front of you. It's a time to kind of go, well, who am I really? And it's like this rare time to kind of check in and be like, what do I actually like? Like, what is actually important to me? What is really important for me to share? Do I even still care about art, or do I want to try something else? You know, like, I don't know, all of the things, but it's a valuable time to check in with self.
Totally. I think that initially when I was presented with those questions, there was a sense of like panic or like concern, because it's, you know, it's like, what, you know, what's going on, like staring into this abyss. And, you know, now isn't it just such a fantastic time? You know, I think to like have this time to ask those questions, I think it's so fantastic. I know, like, you know, I was like, how are we going to look back at this? You know, and I think that there's a lot of people that, you know, you either going to look back at this as like, you know, the time that you took a lot of naps, or you're going to look back at this at the time that you really tapped into like asking yourself, you know, what excites you again, you know, like what is it for you, you know, and then getting to the bottom of that answer is it's an amazing opportunity to do that, you know.
Totally. There is something really important about the space of active discovery. And it sounds like you're doing it, right? You're taking all of these courses where you're learning different tools, and it's like this active, you know, this active space of discovery. It's like, you don't have to know the answer, but you do have to be active in participating on how you're going to discover that answer, right? It's like anything that gives you a little bit of excitement, like fucking try it. And like, and the moment that it grabs you by the tail and it says, no, you got to pay attention to me, then you know you've really struck something that is important to you.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's been it's just been such a great time. Now, I mean, I'm now like, you know, now I'm almost dreading that going back into just chaos again, you know, because we were so busy at one stage. There was no time to sit and think about my own work. I was just busy. I was, you know, just going, you know. So it's just been great, but who knows, like we said, who knows how long this time's going to last for. So, you know, I'm just really taking advantage of it.
That's so cool. I'm really excited to see what the renaissance of Daniel Popper is going to be like, because what you're doing is already like so incredible and so just amazing. So I'm really excited for that, for what that looks like.
There's going to be some beautiful new work coming. For sure.
Oh, cool.
Super excited about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, as a closer, you know, I think one thing that we like to ask everybody is just like, for those at home that are watching, like, what is one piece of advice that you would give them to start upon their artistic journey?
I definitely to just start. To just start, like start anywhere. Give yourself permission to make terrible work. You know, like, don't set yourself up to create a masterpiece. Just make something. And then, you know, it's, and again, you know, it's that thing, like inspiration will find you working. Don't wait to be inspired. Just work, keep doing it, keep making bad work, try different things, play with new materials, you know, and if you find yourself stuck or bored, change, go to a fabric store. And it just keeps it exciting. So
whatever keeps that spark alive, because that spark is going to be the thing that drives you to perfect it. Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, just getting that intention straight before. So it's the reason as to why you're doing it, you know, it's a big deal. And if you can get it straight with yourself before you're doing it, it will help a lot. So, because a lot of the time, and I see it so often with people, they're like, they want to be creative, they want to make art, and then they start, and then the question like, why am I doing this, hits them too hard, and they stop. And so if you don't get it straight with yourself as to why you're doing it, then I think you're gonna run into a block for sure. You know? So, and it can be anything, because it can just be like, for example, one of the things that's helped me is like, I've set an intention to do an exercise that, whether it be like sketching, right? So I'm going to go and practice architectural drawing now, right? So like I'm sketching a building, right? Like, what's the point? I'm not going to sell this drawing. I'm not going to become an architect. Like, why am I doing this? But the intention behind it was to exercise my muscle of being in the present moment with my work. Just staying present and being in the moment of making art, right? That's a muscle that needs work. It needs to exercise, right? So like sketching, training your eye, like developing your skill in architectural drawing and your eye, but more so the intention behind that exercise was to be present, and not think about where I'm going with this, and then I did it, and that's a cool thing. So that was like an intention. It wasn't a grand intention. It wasn't like I'm gonna go and sketch this building to become the world's greatest architectural draftsman. Like that kind of intention will set you up for failure, So I think
and then you can't really, you can't put a price on all the things that you didn't necessarily know that you were going to discover. Like you're training yourself to discover ratios, and you're training yourself to discover lines, and there's so much more that you would not know had you not just gone for it.
Exactly.
I'm so inspired by you and your dedication to your artistry. Like, I'm like, shit, I gotta start drawing puppets or something.
Every electric forest, I'm so inspired by you. Like after every electric forest, I'm like, wow, Nova, man, you're just so badass. Honestly, like the stuff you do is amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I hope that we get to be back there soon. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, everyone who joins us and watches us. If you're watching this now or later, just please know that we, like many, are a part of an industry that has been deeply affected by COVID-19. So not having the events that we normally would share our works has been really devastating on not only the artists, but the communities that we give to. So one way that you can be a part of our quest to support the arts and to keep sharing these works is to spread the word, subscribe to our YouTube, follow our pages, share it with your friends. It's not that much work. You know how to like something. So it would mean a lot to us. Thank you. And if you're interested in following Daniel Popper's journey, please follow him on Instagram and Facebook as well. That's Daniel Popper, Popper. Thank you so much. And join us next week as we'll have a new artist for you every Wednesday night. Until then, thank you. Stay safe, be kind, and love boldly. Thanks, Daniel. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Nova. Bye.